Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm in a pretty similar place to Emily, actually. When Reefa invited me to speak here this evening and, gave me the theme, we had a briefing call, and she said, I just want you to talk about where you are now since you've spoken. I thought, I've got nothing to speak about. I really don't know what to talk about. But actually, I then realised it was a really great opportunity because I'm usually quite bad at that, and it's something that I really want to get better at. Especially it's going to be my 10th year in business, working for myself this year. So thank you. So I really want to, appreciate what I've done, really look back on the past and, review my journey. Really pleased to be here on International Women's Day as well. The theme for International Women's Day this year is Balance for Better. And I know that most people have kind of the actual kind of real definition of that is about creating a more gendered balanced gendered workplace. But some people have also taken it to mean about creating more balance in their lives. And I guess that's what I'm going to be talking about this evening because a few things have happened since 2016. And it's actually probably my first time sharing it in a public space. Lots of people that know me know about the stuff that's happened. But I'm going to be talking about that, talking about how it's impacted me and kind of what I've done as a response as well. And maybe you'll pick up some tips from that, but it would just be quite nice to share the story and see what kind of response I get. So this was when I was speaking in 2016. It was actually almost 3 years to the day. It was Tuesday the 15th of March 2016. And in order to prepare for this talk, I watched the video back, which was excruciating. It's the worst thing to watch yourself and hear yourself. And it's also really hard to find a screenshot where you're not putting a stupid face. So there I was. And just a quick recap of what I was talking about. I spoke about how my business has developed and really the three versions of my business. When I started Bracket, it started off as an agency that brought creative freelancers together to collaborate on projects. And for various reasons, it evolved into me facilitating workshops for teams within companies, which I love, but it wasn't really expected. And at the time of the talk in 2016, I was actually moving into what I call the third version, which is what I called at the time DIY collaboration, do-it-yourself collaboration, which was where I was really getting quite enthused about helping people to learn the skills of facilitation that I had so they could use them within their own teams. And I also spoke a lot about passion and serendipity and being open to change because although my business has evolved quite a lot in those, it was 7 years back then, the thing that had stayed the same was my passion for collaboration. I've always had this strong belief in the power of collaboration, but in order to stay afloat and to keep going, I had to evolve. And I needed to stay open to serendipity, like take opportunities as they came, recognise the opportunities, take opportunities as they came, and do something with them, and also be open to change as well. So at the time, I was kind of trying on version 3.0, and I'd had a few opportunities, a couple in Brighton actually, to do some training around collaboration, workshops, and team facilitation. And in the background, actually, at that talk, 2016, it was, even though I'm smiling in this image, it's actually quite a scary time. Only Reefa knows this. No one in the audience knew this, and I actually asked Reefa not to tell anyone. But 4 days before, I'd actually got out of a week-long stay in hospital. I'd fallen really ill, and it was kind of not unexpected. I kind of knew that something wasn't right, but I'd been ill for a while, sort of throughout 2015. Just some symptoms that didn't feel right. Joint aches and swelling and just feeling fluey, and as often happens with these things, you go to the doctors and they kind of tell you there's nothing wrong with you, and they take blood tests and they can't find anything. So you're just kind of left feeling really crappy basically, and not knowing what to do with it. If I look back, I actually realised that these symptoms already happened before, but I hadn't really noticed it. And it will kind of tell you a little bit about my mindset at the time, sort of how I responded to it. Anyway, 2015, all of these symptoms, going to the doctors. Eventually, these symptoms got so bad, it ended up in a full-blown flare, which is what led to my hospital stay. And I was seeing a doctor. regularly because she could kind of tell there was something wrong, but wasn't quite able to pinpoint it. And one day I walked in, or actually kind of hobbled in, I don't actually know how I even walked there, and she looked at me and she sort of said, I'm going to do a blood test for this. And the results came back that they were so off the scale that I literally had to go into hospital straight away. It was, I won't go into too much detail, but basically it's a sort of, presence of an enzyme within the bloodstream, and the usual level is about 100 up to 100 in a healthy person. At the time for me, it was at 26,000. So I actually had a phone call from a doctor at the hospital who was analysing my blood results in the middle of the night. It was 1:45, just phoning to say, what's going on? Are you, what's happened to you? And I explained that, I've been seeing a doctor, there's obviously something wrong. I'll call the doctor in the morning and see what she says. The way that I responded, though, will probably tell you a lot about my mindset at the time, which, looking back, I know that I've evolved from that. But I did get up, I called the doctor in the morning, left a message with her, but I was actually doing some online training for a company at the time. And I left a message for her. I got a phone call back from her in between these online training sessions, and she said to me, Alison, you've got to go into hospital straight away. I thought, yeah, I'll go into hospital straight away. Put the phone down. I thought, well, I've just got 2 more of these training sessions left. I'll just do those, and then I'll pack up my stuff afterwards. And that's what I did. I kind of powered through. And the ththing is that I was just living there. I was living in my head. I had no kind of recollection of what was happening below my body at the time. So, as I said, tells you a bit about my mindset. It's basically a walking head. So I paused. I had to pause. I didn't have any choice. And I was glad to get into hospital, even though it was scary, because I'd just gone through all of these months of, knowing that something was wrong. The doctors, I had one doctor that literally say to me it was all in my head, even though I woke up every morning feeling like and actually looking like I'd been hit by a bus, all swelling, I just couldn't walk. So relieved to get into hospital because I knew that, at least I'd start to get a diagnosis and I'd start to get, some kind of treatment. And I loved the NHS, they were absolutely brilliant, looked after me really well. But me being me, obviously the minute I got into hospital, I couldn't wait to get out again because I was just so bored. And this talk was one of the things that kept me going. It was really touch and go as to whether I'd actually make it. I was talking 2016. It was really touch and go as to whether I'd actually make it. But it really kept me going. It kept me occupied for a start, because if you've ever had a week-long stay in hospital, there's not very much to do, and it's kind of can be quite depressing. But also it kind of gave me that mindset. It's like, I've got to get out for the Tuesday the 15th of March because I really need to speak at SheSays. Whether it was the best thing to do at that time, probably not. But that's what I did. So I did make it. My partner, lovely, he drove me down because at the time I literally did not have the energy to get on the train and travel down, and he came with me and sat at the back of the audience. And it moved from, would I actually make the event to actually would I make it through the talk? Because I had completely weak muscles, my legs, so I didn't even know if I'd be able to stand for 20 minutes. I had lost a lot of strength in my throat muscles as well, which was making it hard for me to swallow. And I worried whether I'd actually be able to talk through it. I was on lots of medication to reduce the inflammation, so I was just worried whether I would even remember what I was going to say. And also, because I had to flush this thing out of my system, I started drinking 3 litres of water a day, so I was actually worried whether I'd actually make it through the talk without needing to do a pee. But I did get it through, I did make it, but I knew that the minute I sort of got over that, I'd have to start making a lot of changes. And at that point, I couldn't help but take notice of my body. I'd been walking around, not really realising or noticing what was happening. And, this just stopped me. It stopped me, and I couldn't help but notice how I was feeling, notice that I was moving really, really slow. So in 2016, that took priority, like getting myself back to health, getting myself back to full health. And the first thing I looked at was diet. It was probably the easiest thing to do, actually, but it wasn't through any advice of the doctors. I did my own research. And I started to see reports and stories of people that had really helped manage their health through restricting their diet or taking things out of their diet. it's really interesting because although it's kind of a bit of a restrictive diet that I'm on, I've taken lots of things out, and people always say to me, what can you eat? I always start with what I can eat, because it's, these are all the pictures that I took when I first started changing my diet, and I had a lot of fun with it. It was really exciting, actually, because I actually introduced a lot of things to my diet that I hadn't before. So it's a lot of fun, but I had to be a lot more considered about what I was eating. I had to look at all the labels, and I also had to take a lot more time because I was cooking everything from scratch. So it wasn't just about changing my diet. It really was about almost rearranging my life. And as I say, it wasn't just about diet. I also had to look at things like sleep. I used to see sleep as like this inconvenience that I just do in between, working, so that I could just, restore for a bit. And I realised I wasn't getting enough sleep. So I, paid attention to how much sleep I was getting, and also how I was managing stress as well. Again, when you run your own business, this might be familiar to some of you, but I realised that I was sort of running around with this ambient anxiety without realising it. And again, because I started to notice my body, I really started to see when I was stressed, and started to put in things to respond to it. And all of this kind of had a bigger impact. So sort of having to look at my diet, having to look at sleep, having to look at stress, started to start looking at things more holistically. So also through 2016, 2017, I started to look at, what does this mean to me running my own business? And if there's any business owners here, in fact, even if you don't run your own business, but you're, passionate about what you do at work, you'll know that it's often really easy to get overwhelmed with how much there is to do and how many possibilities there are. And it can be really, really difficult to focus. But I started to realise that I needed to manage my energy. Again, I'd kind of seen energy as this infinite resource, and I started to realise that actually, no, I'm going to have to recharge at times. I'm really going to have to think about how I manage my energy. Where do I put my focus? Where do I spend my time? How do I want to manage my energy as well? Not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So I did this exercise. I asked myself 3 questions. I asked myself, what is it that I love doing? What brings me joy? What comes to me with ease? And I don't mean, what do I find really, really easy, but what are the things that I get into flow easily? And when I'm doing it, it doesn't feel like I'm doing it. And also, what is valuable to others? What is it then that every time I do it, I get good feedback from, and I know that I get good results? And it all came down to the workshop facilitation. I love designing workshops, I love facilitating workshops, I love seeing the change in people when I'm facilitating workshops as well. So it led to a bit of a rebrand and a clarity of focus. Oh, I forgot to say that that you may have seen this Ikigai, which is quite similar to the self-assessment that I did, but I didn't know about that at the time. And Ikigai kind of basically helps you to find the things that you love that is of value to other people and is related to your purpose in the world. I didn't know about Ikigai at the time, and actually I was kind of looking more on the left-hand side of the diagram. I didn't really focus on this, but I think it's quite a good tool to sometimes take stock. So it led to a bit of a rebrand for me. The amazing designer that I work with did a really fantastic job of listening to me, talk to her about the focus and the clarity that I wanted. And it all came down to the fact that if everything else falls apart, the one thing that I have that brings me joy, that I know always gets good results, is the workshop design and facilitation. So that is my base camp, the bare minimum of what I do, and therefore also teaching people how to run workshops as well. Those kinds of things didn't take much energy for me because I knew that I loved them and I already had them there. Another thing that I did, this started in 2017 actually, and it came about because I realised that I was really, really hard on myself. Again, you might be familiar with the fact that the way that you talk to yourself sometimes is probably a lot harsher than you talk to other people. And when you work for yourself, it's really hard to kind of set those limits. That voice, you don't sometimes even realise that you're talking to yourself in that way. And I thought to myself, look, Alison, if you had someone working with you, you would never talk to them in the way that you spoke to yourself. So, if you were to have a one-to-one meeting with a new team member, what would be the kinds of things that you ask them? So I started doing this weekly meeting with myself. Every week I would put an hour to an hour and a half in my diary, and I'd sit there with my journal or my notepad, and I'd ask myself these three questions. What happened? What did I do? Which is like my kind of dopamine fix, my checking off the to-do list. What did I learn and how am I feeling? Now, this was a really new question for me. As I said at the beginning, I'm not very good at kind of reviewing and looking back. But this for me was about assessing, what did I do in the week that really brought me joy? Am I spending my time in the places that give me energy? And then am I moving on in the way that I want to? Am I progressing in the way that I want to? So, for example, if I'd run a workshop and something has happened that I wasn't quite happy with, what would I do about it? And then the third question is, what am I thinking about? And that's because always creative ideas, always flying around my head. And that would create a little bit of anxiety for me as well. So I found that getting them out, just, brainstorming all the things that I was thinking about really helped with overwhelm. And the other thing that it helped me do as well was help me to decide, what was for now and what would be for later. So every idea that comes into my head feels urgent, feels like I have to do it straight away. When I put it down in front of me, it's like, do I really need to do that? If I don't need to do it right now, if I don't need to do it this week, it can go in the back of my notebook. And I'll review it, and I'll see, when I review that list at the back of my notebook, maybe it's time to do it. And the other thing that was great about it is great about it, because I still do this, is if I come up with the same things time and time again in what am I thinking about, then I know that it's important to me, and I know that it's something that I can act on. And then you've got the to-do list, the thing that you need to do every week. What I found with this, when I was doing this exercise, when I first started doing it, I would write pages and pages and pages because there was so much. And now as I do it, I get through it much quicker because, again, I really think that it's helped with that overwhelm and helping me to stay focused and clear. So 2018, moving on from that. Now, as I said, I had my workshop design and facilitation as my base camp, but I, as many of us do, like to keep moving on and like to keep progressing. So I went back to this diagram. What do I love doing? What comes to me with ease? What is valuable to others? And I wanted to focus on this one. What do I love doing? Because sometimes the things that I love doing aren't the things that come to me easily and aren't of value to people immediately. And through doing this exercise, through assessing this, I realised that I love creating content, I love writing, but I find it bloody difficult. I find it really, really challenging. And it's not often something that I will put at the top of my to-do list because at the time it feels like I'm not really spending time in the right place, but I love doing it. So it must come in my week somehow. The other thing that I love or wanted to develop was making sure that I was delivering really good work to my clients every time and also deepening my craft. So that really helped me to think, okay, how much time, when I get a workshop in, when I get a request for workshop facilitation, how much time do I want to allocate to that? And it made me realise that I want to kind of extend the time that I work with clients so that I can really go deep and offer them sort of the best that I can. Alongside that as well, I decided to take up a coaching course because I felt that the skills of facilitation and coaching are quite aligned. And through learning coaching skills, I'd be able to deepen my practice further. And then the other thing that I love is just brainstorming how my business can grow. I love being creative around new kind of product ideas, new service ideas. So in my week, there's always a space for content development and writing, for geeking out on the work that I do, and then also just brainstorming and being creative and coming up with ideas for the future. This is kind of my dopamine hit list thing. This is some of the things that I've done since March 2016. It's really interesting, actually, because I remember at the end of the talk in 2016, Refa said something quite flippantly, actually. She says, watch this one because she's going to go global. And since then, I can't say that I've gone completely global, but I have done talks in places that I've never visited for work before. So it's been quite exciting. Been to Athens, I've been to Amsterdam, I've been to Budapest, Zurich, and this amazing little town kind of to the middle of Sweden, towards northeast of Sweden, called Skellefteå, which I never would have visited otherwise. So yeah, some nice little things that I've done there. The other thing, sort of in terms of my work has really developed as well, so in terms of my thinking. And all of that stuff that I spoke about in 2016, this kind of progression, has somehow all come together. So where I saw the kind of, the agency that I ran as separate to the workshop facilitation, it's all kind of convalesced and come together. And through the work that I've done, I've seen the impact of great workshop facilitation and great workshops on team culture. So now I'll talk about how great workshops, great facilitation, and the skills that you need to facilitate great workshops can lead to great team cultures. And I'd look at that on two levels, not only in sort of the skills that you develop, but also in the way that we can make our meetings better. Apparently this is, from Doodle, the meeting scheduling software, that in the UK, we're set this year to waste £58 billion on unproductive, badly organised meetings. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. I do believe that, the way that we run our meetings, the way that we look at how we work together can really change this. So on a very practical level, facilitation, changing the way that we meet. On a deeper level, I talk about this idea of workshop culture, which is, if we start to run our meetings in a way that's more inclusive, encourages people to speak up, encourages people to be creative, it can have a positive impact on our team and organisational culture. A bit of a crowded slide here, but when you run a great workshop, it's, you run it because you want collaboration, you want creativity, you want equal contributions. The experience that you want for people is you want them to be engaged, you want them to feel connected to the material, you want to make progress. And as a result of that, it changes the way that people work together. It changes the way that people communicate, it increases trust, and all of this stuff, it's not stuff that you just want to get in a workshop. Actually, these are the kinds of things we want in our organisations generally. So why do we leave it just to a one-off workshop or one-off brainstorming session? So that's kind of the next stage of my work, really getting this idea of workshop culture out there. I am trying to write my second book on workshop culture, and don't hold me to a date because I really don't know, although, as I said, I have got my time in for writing every day, every week, but it's a slow process. And so where am I now? So when I sort of, thinking about where I am now, where I'm moving forward, there's a lot has changed for various reasons, but also a lot hasn't changed. I'm still super passionate about collaboration. That's been going 10 years strong now. And as you've seen, I've still had to be open to change and take advantage of these opportunities. Someone actually in the coaching course that I just finished last weekend, someone gave me this really beautiful metaphor, which is what I want to leave you with, which is this idea of bamboo is really strong but really flexible. So it never breaks. It kind of, stands really strong in its roots, and it kind of, sways according to what comes along. And I think that's how I'd like to think. I'd like to be like bamboo.